morning, Udi.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here with us, and we're very excited for this conversation this morning. So you've described your early career as being not in front of a spreadsheet, but on stage, now performing as a magician, musician, puppeteer, and then under the name Houdini. That's a good one. How has the theatrical background shaped your approach to building a playful, human-centric brand at Gong?
Well, as you can see, I clearly kept my magician's jacket, which I still use today in marketing. Who knew it would be handy all these years later? It took me years to realize that my background in performing arts, everything from doing magic shows to playing piano at weddings to doing puppetry, they all kind of manifested in my later life career choices because I think of marketing as putting on a show. We're putting on an experience for our audience. And I think there's just a lot of analogies with magic shows. Who's ever been to a magic show before? Okay, fun, right? You see something that looks unreal. The magician makes it look easy. And you know that there's a lot going on that you can't see because the magician simplifies it for you. That's exactly what we do in marketing. That's exactly what we do in marketing. We're putting on an experience, whether it's on stage, like at this beautiful event, or whether it's on our website, like the recent rebrand that Structure just went to, whether it's through the materials that you're sending your customers as channel partners. We're taking something that's inherently complicated. Technology is complicated. Anyone who's ever dealt with the nuts and bolts of building technology knows how complicated it is, but it's our collective job to simplify it and put on a show and an experience that makes it easy to interact with technology. And I found that became my passion for the last 20 years, just like taking sometimes complicated card tricks or stage illusions and creating something that looks very simple and almost magical. And I'm not the first to say that when technology is advanced enough, it is impossible to differentiate it from magic. And I think that great marketing can do the same. If we can simplify the message, the technology, and the value to our customers, then we're doing our jobs.
Thank you. So in your book, Courageous Marketing, you argue that playing it safe is the riskiest strategy of all. So how do you balance bold category-defining move with the need of structured execution?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that question because when I wrote my book, Courageous Marketing, which Structured generously bought copies for all of you that I'll be signing later in the break. When I was writing the book, I talked to over a dozen of my former team members and other CMOs and asked them what environments allowed them to create their best work. Because we all want to do that, right? We all look at other teams in awe and say, wow, I wish I had that sort of culture where people weren't afraid to take risks and be edgy and run experiments. But we all see it and know it, but how do we actually reverse engineer it and create that? So I'll give you the very short version of it here, and I'll answer your question, Daniel, on how to counter that or balance that with reaching structured goals. No pun intended. So here's the short version of it. What I discovered in my research on my team and other teams, and I think Adam Grant put it best in his book, Think Again. He talked about, he described teams at NASA and other high-performing organizations and wanted to understand what makes them tick. And it turns out that creating what he calls psychological safety, which in layman's terms just means that we create a culture in which our team members can fail safely. That is the point. We allow them to fail safely. We make them feel secure about running experiments and taking risks. And if something doesn't work out, which inevitably a lot of things are not going to work out, we treat that as a learning. We don't make them feel bad for trying it because guess what that will do? That will be the last experiment that they will ever run. And teams that are kind of stilted and don't ever seem to take risks and be bold, it's because they don't feel that psychological safety. They think that everything they do is expected to work out. And guess what happens when that is the culture of the team? They take no risks. They are not edgy. They are not bold. They are followed what a lot of us like to call best practices. And I use air quotes to say best practices because what best practices really are boring practices. Because by the time anything becomes known as a best practice, everyone is already doing it. And so that is the surest way of getting ordinary results. Daniel mentioned IBM in the 1980s. Everyone remembers the famous IT saying, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. You do not want to be the modern incarnation of running campaigns that are not going to get you fired because they are the standard. That's not to say anything bad about IBM. They really were amazing and still are. But if you want to stand out, you need to be different. And I'm sure we'll talk about more ways of doing that today.
So talking about being courageous, no, I think the name Gong and the color that you picked and the image on the brand at the beginning was really bold and very unique at that time. Tell us a bit more about that. Was that the original name or picked later on?
So fun fact, so here's a scoop. The original name of Gong, I bet nobody here knows. The company was incorporated as Honeyfi. Honeyfi, that was the original company name. Thankfully, it lasted for a very short while that none of you have to share that horror. And my CEO, I can't take credit for that, my CEO and co-founder, Amit Bendov, he came up with the name Gong, which is evocative, as everyone on a sales team know. What do we do when we win a deal? We hit the gong. Turns out there's an actual word for that, hitting. It's called clanging the gong.
Clang.
So you clang the gong. And he came up with the word gong, which is evocative and is serving us well even through the last 9 years of our platform evolving from what was originally conversation intelligence to then revenue intelligence. And then we added applications like forecasting and sales engagement. And now it's a full-fledged AI revenue platform. But Gong still evokes the same emotions and dreams that every sales team has. To answer your question on the early days, so in 2019, I was the first marketer at Gong. I was employee number 13 at the company. I joined when we had 11 customers. And I was tasked with getting our name out there and making sure people knew about us enough that they wanted to try and they were curious about the product. And so in 2019, it was time to put together our first intentional visual identity. And I looked at hundreds of B2B websites, especially those in our space. I found that all of them were using what one of my team members called Series A blues. You know what I'm talking about. They're these shady blues. They pair beautifully with whites and grays. And every single B2B website, yeah, you were there, you remember, everyone was using those same shades of blue. So I thought, okay, there's two ways we can go here. One, I can absolutely crush this by choosing the bestest shade of blue. Or I could go in a completely different direction. And I decided to go in a completely different direction. And I've made that choice hundreds of times in my career, and that's pretty much always the right answer. Because here's the thing. To be better at the game of choosing the right blue, you've got to be 200 times better, or at least 20 times better, and that's really, really hard to do. I often don't know how to do that. You can't just be 20% better and choose a slightly nicer blue. Nobody's going to notice you. You're going to be lost in that sea of sameness that we're all dreading. But if I went in a different direction, which we did, and we end up choosing fuchsia pink, bright purple, and a drooling bulldog as our mascot that we slapped over all of that, we immediately got everyone's attention because we were so different. And by being so different, and especially if you can be the first to do something, you stand out by definition. You're the leader in that category of one for a short time, and that's how you earn a lot of attention. And so that has been the approach that we took with our visual identity, with our content marketing, with our event experiences, and later on with the whole category building.
Yeah, and yet it was really leadership of, and of marketing to build a brand. But you emphasize that brand should not be just owned by marketing, but the entire organization, from leadership and the rest of the team. So can you explain what you mean by that, and also how that can be reflected into channel marketing and how channel marketers can own the brand and deliver it through their partners to the end customers?
Absolutely. So in a paraphrase on a famous saying by one of the Hewlett-Packard founders who said that marketing is too important to leave it to marketing, I will narrow in and say that branding is too important to leave it to marketing. Mm-hmm. And brand is too important. And here's what I mean. As an in-house marketer, the fastest way to fail at a branding project is to agree to own the company brand. I don't know if anyone has experience with that traumatic experience of owning the company brand, but there's no way that a marketer can succeed in owning the brand. And here's why. Because in the worst of cases, it'll look like putting lipstick on a pig. Because if you're trying to portray something that the company is not really doing in their everyday interactions with customers, with candidates, with employees, with investors, with partners, that incongruency is going to shine. And here's a simple example from our consumer life, right? Anyone ever had a good experience calling their cable provider when internet was down, and you're listening to how important your call is when they finally pick it up 45 minutes later. What were you thinking at that time? We're thinking, oh, they have a really great brand. They really stand behind what they say, and I can see how important I am. No, of course you were mocking them, like, who's the idiot who put this recording on? Like, you can tell me that you don't have enough people to answer and you're super sorry it's taking so long, but don't tell me my call is important and let me wait 45 minutes, because clearly it is not important to you. And that's what you don't want to happen. And so what we did at Gong, we went through a longer process of building our brand. And part of that is understanding that the CEO and the entire executive team have to own the brand, and that's where it starts from, and that's where it trickles down to every last employee. And then at best, marketing can be the steward of the brand and can package it with a visual identity, with a tone of voice, with experiences, but everything becomes infinitely easier when we know what the company stands for, and every person in every interaction is creating those values every day. I'll give you a simple example. One way that we defined who we want to be and who we are at Gong is, in the early days, we were about 70 employees. We sat down with members of every team and every site, and we boiled down what are our operating principles. How do we actually make decisions and do business every day? And we narrowed it down to 8 operating principles. Other companies have done this. At Twilio, they have their 9 things, and other companies changed the name and number a little bit. But essentially, what these companies have in common is that they have a playbook for how we make decisions every day. And so you can find all 8 of our operating principles on our website, but I'll name one to give an example of what I'm talking about. Our first operating principle is create raving fans. That is it. 3 words. Create raving fans. And that's probably our most best known operating principle, both internally and externally, because everything we do, we try to look at it through the lens of how do we create raving fans. That means a product manager who meets a customer who has a request, they will get back to them as quickly as they can in delighting speed to create a raving fan by giving them what they wanted. Recruiting coordinator will never leave a candidate in the dark, and she will always be in touch with them, telling them where they stand. And you know how we know that's working? Because if you go to our Glassdoor reviews, you'll see positive reviews from candidates who did not get an offer from Gong, but they had such a positive experience that they felt compelled to go write about it and hope that one day they will earn another job at Gong. And of course, when marketing and sales do that, as we treat customers, everything becomes infinitely easier when we can amplify those raving fan experiences that everyone across the board is creating. So remember that creating a brand is everything you do, from how the recruiting coordinator treats a candidate to how a support engineer closes a ticket. All of that is brand, and that's why it's too important to leave to marketing.
Amazing. So you refer really early on to AI before anybody was talking about AI. I believe back then it was still called machine learning. You build an amazing brand, but you created one of the most difficult things in the technology space in general, is to create a new category, revenue intelligence. Getting the analysts to recognize it, getting the industry to recognize it, and took Gong from 0 to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue through this process, which is really amazing. Part of channel marketing is difficult to tell the story through the partners and build that, maybe not category defining, because the channel marketers don't define it, it's more corporate marketing. But what channel marketers working through partners, working through those fans and the one that need to take it to the end customers, what they can learn from that experience of defining, building a message that really deliver all the way through the value proposition, the unique story of the product to the end customer, where they don't have direct control of that process.
Yeah, so category creation is something that I think is widely misunderstood. Some marketers think that categories are created by the analysts, by the Gartners and the Forresters of the world. It's the exact opposite. Those analysts are the laggards, and I have great relationships with Gartner, Forrester, and everyone else in the space. They are the laggards, and they will be the first to admit this. Yes, they can write about some predictive stuff in their cool vendor report if you're Gartner, or an early market report if you're someone else, but they wait to see the customers and the vendors create a category that typically has a dozen or more vendors and hundreds of millions in revenue before they will ever create their report. Now, you're lucky to be working with Structure that is already a recognized leader in the Forrester Wave, which is amazing, and congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
And from here on, the game is all about consistency. Consistency in the language that we use, which not coincidentally, structured allows you easy access and allows your customers easy access to the same language that everyone is using. And that consistency is what creates de facto a category in your space. The other thing is consistency in using the customer success stories. So I remember one thing that we did, and I'm presuming you did something similar with the rebranded structure now. When we recategorized what Gong was doing from conversation intelligence to revenue intelligence, we went back to some of our best customer stories, and with their permission, we changed some of the language that they use to describe the benefits that they're getting, not from conversation intelligence, but from revenue intelligence, so that we could continue showcasing those stories and make sure they're up to date in all of our materials, and that all our partners were using the right stories with the right language. And that is what you can do with structured and with the new name, using their own software, which is a bit of a tautology, but it's a great thing to be able to do, that you have the right language, you already have the leadership position, you just need to showcase that and make sure you're doing it in a consistent way. So you should never be waking up in the morning thinking, well, how am I going to present this use case, or how am I going to present the business value? The answers are probably already in the system. And when you do that with your channels to get your message across, you need to make sure that they can find the answers within structured, because that consistency is what's going to create the language. And we measure that at Gong in several ways. One of them is just looking at Google searches for new terms that we defined as part of our category. When we launched Revenue Intelligence, it was October 8th, 2019. There were 0 Google searches for Revenue Intelligence. And over the years, that has gone up to thousands of searches a month. And that is a result of consistently using that language, consistently using those customer stories.
Mm-hmm. So in your book and in some of your podcasts, you speak in very details about your LinkedIn advertising campaigns and how precise you went in and analyze it, even to the point of what days in the week to publish something, what time of the day to do it. Tell us more about your experience and how this very precise analytics and work drove huge success through social media, LinkedIn, and other networks.
Sure. So a couple of quick lessons, and again, I break this all down in lots of detail in the book for those who want to explore more. But one thing we discovered is that nobody can be good at 20 different channels when I'm talking about like social media or content distribution channels. And so after a few months of experimenting to see where the critical mass of our audience was, in our case, we found out that since we're selling to revenue leaders, at that time mostly in tech, unsurprisingly, they live on LinkedIn, but we tested it for a few months against Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and other platforms. We found they are on LinkedIn. As soon as we found that out, we started optimizing all of our content for that one platform, because that meant that we could go deeper than anyone could go if they're trying to manage 6 or 8 different platforms. That meant that we were reading, and we still are, the LinkedIn engineers blog about what's changing in the algorithm and what type of posts they're optimizing for and rewarding, so we could get ahead of our competition. And we quickly gained a lot of followers on LinkedIn. Gong enjoys more than 300,000 followers on LinkedIn right now, which is quite a lot for a B2B profile. That's the company profile. And we did that by really specializing in what's working, what's not. Let me give you 2 quick tips that you can probably start doing today. Number 1, and this is a bit counterintuitive, but the posts that do best look as if they don't belong there. And this is true for any social media channel. If your LinkedIn posts look well polished and designed and every word is perfect, they look like an ad, and people are going to keep scrolling past them because nobody wants to read more ads. But if you do a very raw video that you took with your selfie camera and you're not made up and you're standing maybe outside or taking a walk in the park and sharing your insights, you will see a lot more traction on that, because it looks like it doesn't belong there. It looks like, shouldn't that be on TikTok or Instagram or somewhere else? Like, why is this on LinkedIn? Now I'm curious, so I'm going to stop scrolling. I'm going to hit that play button to see, what is she talking about? So that's one tip to keep in mind. Just, it goes back to being different. Different is better than better. Don't try to be more polished than the thousands of polished posts. Be unpolished, and now you're winning because you're different. The second thing is, when thinking about what audience wants to consume on any platform, the answer is typically some form of edutainment. Edutainment, if this is the first time you're hearing the word, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a combination of both education and entertainment. We want to educate them. We want them to know about our products and our offerings and all that stuff. And they want that, but they also want to be entertained, because guess what? The same serious people that you're selling to in daytime, when they're multitasking, they're scrolling through their Instagram and TikTok. They're humans just like you and me. So why wouldn't they want that entertainment value in their business network, whether it's LinkedIn or somewhere else, or even your website? Just keep it light. Keep it light. Now, you don't have to be the court jester on everything you do. If that's not your brand, that's fine. That worked for Gong, being very lighthearted, being the unbuttoned sort of guy that is just helpful and answers a question, because we don't want to look like these really stuffy old firms, people shaking hands and wearing business suits. Like, none of us really go to work dressed like that, and none of us act like that. So why are we putting this false pretense up on our website? Turns out people respond a lot better when you keep it human, and when it looks like it doesn't belong on the platform.
So when I first came to know Gong, which was really the early days of the company, I was always impressed with the branding. I knew how little money you raised, and I was always surprised. So I go to Dreamforce, and it's Gong everywhere. I believe there were some campaigns here running in New York. Then I watched the Super Bowl. In the middle of the Super Bowl, there is a Gong commercial, right, which costs typically, the number on the market is like $500,000 for 30 seconds.
More like $7.5 million.
Half a million, yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah. And I said, how can they manage to build such a impressive brand exposure? And where did they get the money from? Later on, reading your book and listening to your podcast, I learned that you didn't have that amount of money.
That is the spoiler.
Everybody,
I did not have the money.
Yeah. So how did you do it? And how, again, we can take that to channel marketing, because channel marketing organizations typically have limited budget. Not talk about the channel partners themselves that face, like every business, the crunch of reducing costs and doing more with less, but building brand and building stories in a creative way that doesn't cost that much.
So you already stole my thunder, and as you already told people, I never actually had $7 million to run a Super Bowl commercial, but I ran a Super Bowl commercial. I didn't have hundreds of thousands to run Times Square billboards, but I regularly run Times Square billboards. I've taken out full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. I've had my Gong logo on the Warriors court at the Chase Center as Steph Curry was breaking the three-pointer career record. I did all these really crazy stunts, and over the years and lots of experimentation, some of which did not go very well. I could tell you stories about food delivery robots in San Jose delivering pizzas to the wrong address, but we won't get into that today. True story. The framework that I came up with, which I dedicated a whole chapter in the book called Punch Above Your Weight, is meant for marketers who want to look bigger than they are, and there's always good reasons to do that. One, you can hit much bigger reach than your budget allows you to. Two, if you are on a budget and if you're in early days and you want to reach larger enterprise buyers, the catch-22 you're facing is that large enterprise buyers don't want to buy from a young startup because they don't know if they're going to be around in 2 years. They don't think the product is mature. They don't think they have enough customer references. So there's always good business reasons to want to look bigger than we really are, hence the chapter title, Punch Above Your Weight. And so here's, again, in a nutshell, the framework that I found, but I do encourage you to go in. There's plenty of colorful examples in the book of how to do this. What I found is that if I pick a medium, it's a six-part structure, so I'm going to go through really quickly. Number one, if I pick a medium that's typically associated with big advertisers, Super Bowl, Times Square billboards, Wall Street Journal, I start with that. Two, I look for a hack for how can I get the very cheap, affordable version of that doesn't look like it's a cheap, affordable version. And that's where a lot of the magic lies. So I'll give you some examples. Times Square billboards, you'd think, because we see that that's where Apple launches their iPhones and the latest Netflix series advertises there, you'd think this is associated with really big advertising. It must be really, really expensive, right? Wrong. You can actually buy for $500, probably sometimes even less, surplus from inventory because everything is now digital and they're rotating up to 6 or even 8 ads in 1 minute. If you go to a website like blipbillboards.com, it's an on-demand portal where you could buy a billboard while still sitting in this room before you leave, and you'll see some of them for hundreds of dollars in prime locations like Times Square, or if you're in Europe in Piccadilly Circus, or in Hong Kong, or in Ginza in Tokyo, wherever you want it. And so that's step number 2. You find a very affordable version of that medium that you can actually do on a dime. Number 3, you get creative with the medium. So just like everything we've talked about till now, don't do the obvious, right? Don't just take something from your website and put it up there because nobody's going to care. Do something creative. One thing that we do regularly is we feature our outstanding Gongsters, which is the lovable nickname of our outstanding employees. We post them on billboards every year at Times Square, and they get so excited of coming there and taking selfies and showing mom, and all their team members are so proud of them that they share that. So I'm already hinting at the end of how we get a lot more reach, but do something creative that's not obvious with that. Taking out a Super Bowl commercial for software that helps sales teams succeed is not something obvious. Very, very few B2B companies do that. So by definition, I was being different and I stood out. And our audience was beyond themselves seeing an ad dedicated to heads of sales on the Super Bowl game. So that's the next part. The next part is you make sure that you have a photographer and or a videographer to take great photos and footage of that campaign when it goes out, because that is what I'm going to use to amplify it to the audience I truly care about. Because you might ask me, well, Udi, okay, you bought for $500 a billboard that lights up for 6 seconds out of every minute for 1 day in Times Square, but what are the odds of this random tourists on their way to Phantom of the Opera buying your software? I don't care about the random tourists. I care about the $250 photographer that I got on TaskRabbit, had them sit there and wait for it to show up, took a few great photos of that, and now I'm going to use those photos on my social media, where, remember, I have 300,000 followers, and in my organic social media, I can now reach huge reach for free by paying $500 for that billboard and $250 for the photographer. Now I can actually amplify it to my captive audience that cares about what I'm doing. And when they see, wow, Gong just did this Times Square campaign, they must be on a roll, they're on a tear. And that was the exact response that I got from the Super Bowl audience. If you're wondering how I pulled that off, turns out that while the national spot does cost something to the tune of $7.5 million, you can get a regional spot for the very low 6 figures. And if you know that you have 1, 2, or 3 regions that you care about, you can just buy those regions, patch them together, and the viewing experience of your audience is going to be identical to the national spot. So within the same commercial break, they might see a Doritos national spot, and they might see your regional spot, one after the other. It's the same experience. They have no idea that you're running it only in their local cable station. And so I bought very cheap media for Super Bowl, and that's how I ran that. And then I amplified that to my LinkedIn audiences. So for those who missed the game, they saw it on LinkedIn, and everyone just went crazy. And then the final step of that, step 5, was sharing it on your social media for that extended reach. And the final step is asking your employees and your customers to also share that if they're excited about it, and that further amplifies your reach. At Gong, we have 1,500 employees. Let's say that on average, each of them only has 500 followers. Can you imagine the reach that I get when I ask everyone to share a piece of content? I could never afford that reach, but you can do that. And if you're showcasing your customers, as we do every year with our customer awards, you can ask your customers to share that, and they will happily do it, because now you're making them look cool and great and at the helm of technology. So think about that, and that's really the punch above your weight framework. Pick a medium associated with a big advertiser, buy a simple, affordable version of it, get creative with the medium, make sure you take good photos and videos of it, amplify that on your own social channels, and finally ask your employees and customers to share as well, and you will look much, much bigger than you really are. Thank you.
Good. So if we look through the theme of your building the brand at Gong, it seems that you do everything different, starting with different colors and different website, different media, different approach to marketing. And you have written recently about this, the sea of sameness on AI, right? It looks the same, it feels the same, it reads the same. It's easy, it's very quick to produce, but when people start to see the content, they start to see that it's not that authentic anymore. Authentic anymore. What would you recommend to people about balancing about the use of AI and technology to the use of human, and keep that unique creative work and special touch when it comes to marketing, to messaging, to branding?
So I think that's a great topic to kind of bring us to a close here. For those who've been around long enough as I have, and I've been doing B2B marketing for over 20 years, I remember this must have been about 15 years ago with some of my colleagues in other companies. They got very excited that they found an option to offshore some of their content creation, and they were very proud that they could get blog posts written for $50, which is way cheaper than you'd have to pay someone here or in Europe to do that work. And I was kind of scratching my head and like, okay, what is your goal though? Are you trying to save money by not writing quality content? Or are you trying to get that content actually read and engaging so people want to do business with you? Because nobody wanted to read those $50 blog posts. I mean, at best, they were helpful for SEO, if even that. And fast forward to 2025, I see a lot of the same abuse being done to AI, where people are like, I don't need my content writers anymore. I just go to ChatGPT and tell it to fill whatever I need, 2,000 words about whatever topic in the world. It'll come up with words. Does anybody want to read those words? Not really, because it doesn't have any unique point of view. If you understand how those AI LLMs are built, they take the state of the art, they take all the articles and all the books, and they regurgitate them in a very confident way, which is kind of like mansplaining when you think about it. They talk confidently about things they know little about. That's exactly the same thing. Now, would you want to read that or listen to that? Hell no, right? So here's the point. I think a lot of us are too worried about losing our jobs to AI. What we should be worried about is losing our jobs to a human who knows how to correctly use AI. Those are the people who are going to take our jobs. And those are the people, just like I told you, understanding the LinkedIn algorithm allowed us to excel there, understanding the right AI tools, whether it's structured for channel marketing, whether it's writing tools, whether it's ICP targeting tools, whether it's content creation tools, understanding what they're good at, what they're not good at, and how to combine both artificial and human intelligence. That's going to create the next wave of great content that's going to continue to be engaging. And you can so easily see through the bullshit content that's written by the LLMs. Nobody wants to read that. Please don't put any of that out. It's not too late to create something unique. And AI, I'm not here to diss AI. AI is wonderful. We use it every day. I sell AI software for a living. But you need to understand its limitations, and you need to enhance it with human intelligence when you need it. So it's not going to come up with a unique, sharp point of view that's going to replace your next big story. You know, one example, I'll finish with this. A few years ago at Gong, we published research that showed that based on a few billions of sales calls that we analyzed, salespeople who swear on their sales call, who use the S word or drop an occasional F-bomb, they have an 8% higher win rate. This is true. This is science, people. I don't make up the facts. This is science. And we came up with that story. We ran with it. It was very quickly picked up by fastcompany.com. So I got earned reach to I don't know how many thousands or millions of viewers that I never could have paid for. As soon as that came out, radio stations started calling me to get me on air to talk about this juicy story. And I talked about it, and we had a complete field day with that, with the internet going wild, with about 2/3 of the people saying, yeah, that's the shit I've been talking about, and see, Bob, that's what I've been telling you the whole time, with the other third being completely appalled that we would suggest using this type of language in a professional setting. Could AI come up with that story? No. But AI could take that and slice it and dice it and prepare it for Twitter and for LinkedIn and for Facebook and all that. But nobody's going to replace your mind and your sharp point of view in coming up with the next big story. So don't delegate that to AI. Thank you.
What about using those words on stage? So when we look at building the brand, right, as a chief marketing officer, you control the story, you control the budget, you have your own direct team, so in some way you can direct and encourage them to build it. They're still part of your team. So you have a lot of control in the process. As you know, most of our guests here are channel marketers, right? And they face several challenges, right? They don't control the brand, something that comes from corporate marketing. Budget is limited, and their go-to market is through other organizations that have their own stories, their own priorities, and sometimes other brands that compete on the same limited attention that they can provide to marketing, right? So if there is one thing our audience can take from the event today, what would that be? What do they take home and can implement in their channel marketing strategies that can be as effective as running your own brand, but through others that you have very limited control on?
So to recap a few of the elements we talked about today and bring them together, I think one thing everyone here can try, first of all, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And I work very well with a lot of restrictions and stipulations, including having a small budget and a small team. And that's where really I feel I and my team created the best work, because money makes us lazy. If you look at the big advertisers, they can afford to be boring. They have a lot of money, they can throw money at the problem, and they end up just managing agencies who manage agencies, and they buy all the expensive billboards and ads, but they're not interesting campaigns. But when we have smaller budgets, smaller teams, we have to get creative. We can't afford to be boring. And so I think two elements that any of us can try tomorrow is, one, how do we punch above our weight? How do we buy some regional media or do something that people don't expect from a brand our size, and using the approved messaging and the wonderful materials that we can find for the brands that we're promoting, how do we go and push them in an unexpected medium that people weren't expecting to make us look much bigger than we are and make us stand out? That would be number one. And the second thing is, I would go back to what we started with, the psychological safety. How can we put ourselves in a better position and our team members in a position where we can fail safely, so we can be more edgy, so we can run experiments? And I talk in the book about how to do that safely, and of course we have to counter that with what Adam Grant calls process accountability, which means we're not just doing crazy things for the sake of doing crazy things. We know what the North Star is. We have a revenue number or a pipeline number or a meetings number or whatever it is we're trying to create, and we have a hypothesis for every one of these experiments, if they succeed, how they're going to serve that North Star number that we're working towards. And if we do that and we invest in internal marketing and explain that this is what we're doing, and if it doesn't work, well, we know it doesn't work. We didn't spend too much money on it. It's a great learning. We're going to try something else. But guess what? If it does work, we can double down on this and beat the heck out of it until it stops working, and we're going to get an edge and a leg up on our competition. So create that psychological safety in your working environment, and especially for your teams, and you'd be surprised what they will produce for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Udi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.